Okay, this is part two video of this week, August 31st through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, like the 4th. So here we go. We're going to start with module 1.1 today, why world history or what is history, okay? So these questions that I have here, and I'll post these again, I'll post these on Google Classroom and on that document that's due weekly. These questions I'd like you to think about through the first module, which is module 1.1 through module 1.4. Okay. So with that, let's take a look at let's see here. Record this tab. Let's take a look at, oh, wrong one. Let's take a look at module 1.1. We'll just discuss it a little bit. What is world history? Now, it would probably be, or what is history? It'd probably be important if I had the right tab open. And now you can hear the ducks in the background. Okay, here we go. Yeah. All right, here we go. So, what is history? What is it? The objective, okay, the goal of this presentation specifically is to help students have a better understanding of what history is. Okay, it is important. Okay, what do a lot of my students in the past, at least at the beginning of the year, what do they think history is? I think they think it's boring, required, necessary. Well, okay, let's just look at the first two. I think that a lot of them, to start out with, think that it's boring or at least irrelevant. Okay, they also do know that it's required, right? It is required to graduate high school. Okay, but in all actuality, it's necessary and it's relevant. So let's move on from there. Seriously though, what is history? Putting it simply, it is a study of the past. Okay, who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? People have been asking these questions forever, for their entire lives. Okay? Okay. So, to put it simply, it's a study of the past. Okay? Long before there was any, before humans were writing things down or anything. Okay? Questions were being asked. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? Okay? What's my purpose here? All kinds of questions like that. Okay? And like I said, but even before there was written history, people are asking these questions. Okay? And we know this. We know this because when history, well, from some of the archaeological finds that we find, cave paintings even, okay, and as soon as writing was invented, we see records of both questions and answers through stories about the world, how the world might have come to exist, at least in a particular culture or religion, and the purpose of life or lack of purpose of life. Okay, so hopefully in this course we will help answer some of those questions, or at least help you to start evaluating those questions and come up with some answers for yourself. All right. Why study history? Okay, good question. Really good question. To understand and be inspired by great minds and actions of people from the past. Okay, Socrates, one of the founders of philosophy, he claimed that he was the wisest man alive because he realized that really he knew nothing. Okay, which paved the way for reason to compete with power as a way for people to resolve disputes. Now, if you don't understand that, it's okay. Just know that it's a way to understand and be inspired by the great minds and actions from people of the past, people that did great things, people that came up with great ideas. Okay. Another example of that, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom led that country to world dominance, reigned as the matron of the royal families of Europe, and ushered in an era of moral restraint, which lasted a century, 100 years. Okay, her impact is still seen today. Okay, whether it's on coins or whether there's memorials or whatnot. Okay, or even in how the people of Britain or the United Kingdom revere her. Let's see here. Number two, to learn and avoid, to understand and learn to avoid the horrible thoughts and actions of people from the past. Um, an example. The Aztecs and Iroquois, they used to torture and sacrifice their prisoners as a way of honoring them. Okay, that's a very interesting way to think. The Nazis, carrying out Hitler's ideas for the extermination of the Jews, they created an industrial system of execution, which killed about 6 million Jews or more during the Holocaust. Now, obviously, that is something that we want to avoid in the future. We want to learn from experiences like that, grow from them, and become better as people. Okay, that's another reason to study history. To learn about ways in which people organize themselves in the past, for better and for worse. Okay, so example, right? Because that's like, what? So check this out. The Norse and Celts in Iceland developed a sophisticated system of justice built around clearly understood rights and duties. Then they really didn't have any need for a big government to enforce it. Okay, people knew the things, they knew what the consequences were, and they followed those. So there was no need for a big police force or anything like that. Okay, Hindus in parts of Southeast Asia or South Asia have practiced sati, in which a widow would commit suicide by throwing herself on top of a funeral pyre for her dead husband. Okay, that's part of their culture, part of that particular culture in South Asia, in South India. Not everybody does that, obviously, but it's part of their culture. So learning and understanding that in Ames, right? In Ames, there are quite a few people from India, from that region in general. Okay, understanding who they are and why they do things helps us to understand how they think, which can help us to work better together. Okay. Okay. Next one, to explain and understand how decisions made by others in the past limit or expand our choices today as individuals and members of groups, right? So people have made decisions in the past. How do those affect us today, whether it limits us or whether it expands our choices? So example of that, August 27th, 1963, you don't have to memorize that date. Martin Luther King Jr. was giving a speech at Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. A woman named Mahalia Jackson, standing nearby, said, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." King went off script and began the "I Have a Dream" speech, which has affected people throughout the rest of history. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is used in history classes and English classes. It's used in in classes about morality. It's used in philosophy class. It's used all over the world. Okay, for people to study and learn from. Okay. All right. Another reason why we study history, right? There's a whole bunch, and we talked about some of these on Thursday and Friday, but this is a list that Sertel has, so it's kind of adding to what we discussed already. So this final one is to explore the various ways in which change has occurred in the past. So how has change happened in the past? And using that to evaluate ways to improve our society, while at the same time, because this can happen, right? the road to a certain place is paved paved in good intentions, but good intentions don't always turn out good. Okay, so what we want to do is look at the past, learn from it, try and make changes to improve our society without making those changes cause more damage. Okay, let's talk about some examples. Around 30 AD, a Jewish teacher from Nazareth named Jesus preached that people's primary ethical duty is to love God and one's neighbor. This brings the notion that everyone is entitled to dignity and respect, right? That is a new way of thinking back then. Okay. In 1215, and I think I mentioned this both days, Thursday and Friday, at least part of this. In 1215, King John of England signed the Magna Carta, granting rights to Englishmen, limiting the power of the king, and creating a framework for what would later become constitutionalism. In other words, how we set up our government in the United States, right? Okay. This last one here, this last one for this reason, for why we study history. This is fantastic. And someday I'm going to get a poster of this guy and put him up in my room. On September 11th, 1906, while protesting a registration act in South Africa, Mahatma Gandhi introduced his theory of satyagraha, in other words, devotion to truth, which is a system of nonviolent, non-resistant protest to overthrow injustice, which basically started the movement to end colonialism, which we'll talk more about colonialism when we get to it. Okay. So those are some of the reasons that we study history. Okay. Hopefully throughout this course, you guys will come back to that and you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I get this. This is why we're looking at this. Right. It'll make sense to you. Okay. So what's next? Let's see here. Oh, there we go. Different ways to think about history. Okay, there's 4 different ways. All right. Well, there's 2 big ways, and then there's 2 that kind of come off of that. One is a cyclical view of viewing history. In other words, history constantly repeats itself, if that makes sense to you. Okay. Hindus, ancient Greeks, and Romans all believe these kinds of things. Okay, that history is just a constant cycle going over and over again. Okay. There's a linear view. In other words, history has a beginning and an end. Okay. Humanity came from somewhere and we are going somewhere. Okay. This would be Muslims, Christians, Jews. They typically hold a linear view of history. Okay. Now, within each of these, there's a couple other options. There's determinism. Okay. In other words, all events in the world are leading to a predetermined ending. Okay. Everything around us is already determined. Okay. So a group of people that would believe in this, Marxists, for example. Okay. And we will get into what Marxists are if you don't already know. So don't worry. Or you can just Google it, which is also very helpful. Okay. And then the other one would be free will. Okay. We have the ability to influence the future through our choices, within some limits and with some expectations. Okay. Now, Christians would be a good example of who holds ideas like this. Okay. Finally, there's this big question of whether it even matters. For some, history is moving toward an inevitable end in which evil is finally destroyed. Okay. Zoroastrians believe this, along with a whole bunch of other religions. For others, there's no purpose to life other than maybe to perpetuate one's genes, okay, as with a Darwinian point of view. Perpetuate one's genes to make the genes better, okay? So those are kind of different ways of thinking about history, all right? And a lot of people combine them. It just depends on your background, how you were raised, what culture you came from, what your personal beliefs are, okay? So how you think about this may make a real difference to you. Okay. Do you want to live your life as if nothing matters? Do you believe you have a duty to make the world a better place? If not, that's okay. I hope you do, and even if it's just in a small way, like living your life the best you can live it. How important do you believe your actions could be in changing history? Your answers to these questions, combined with understanding of what was good and bad about the past and how it has changed in different contexts, may make your change may make you change your view about your own path, and in turn, change your own destiny. All right. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, again, write it down and put it, and then we'll talk about it on Wednesday during the question and answer online session from 12:45 to 1:30. Okay. Hey, as always, it's been fun. It's been great. I hope you guys have a good day. We'll talk at you in a little bit.